I am here in studio for a play about Old Scituate, and when we say Old Scituate, of course, that also includes the town of Norwell. So we have two experts in here to tell us a little bit about what this play is about, Old Scituate, and what happened many years ago, 1775. What was the reaction after Concord and Lexington? First, we want to say hello to Wendy Bawabe. She is the president of the Norwell Historical Society. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Christine.
And you wrote the play that we're going to talk about. Jim Glinski, you actually wrote the book that the play is based on.
I did.
We're glad to have you here. Of course, he's a historian, an author, and a member of the Scituate Historical Society. You're a busy man. Now, it's interesting. We were talking a little bit off air about Scituate and what their contribution was to mustering and getting going to battle for the country, to join the Revolution. You hear a lot about Concord and Lexington. You don't hear as much about the South Shore. Wendy, why is that?
Well, I think in history, when we took history class in high school or in college, there was a limited time space that they had to teach a big span of history. Mm-hmm. So I think the battles of Lexington and Concord really focused on Lexington and Concord and then the Revolutionary War as a whole. And we forget that the history was also happening here in Old Scituate.
That's right. And Jim, we were talking a little bit off air too, and in fact here in Marshfield where the station is, this was kind of a Tory stronghold, this area.
Yep, Marshfield had that reputation, and they did have 77 of their citizens put on a banishment list that if they ever came back to Marshfield or the state of Massachusetts, after they were essentially booted out and some of them went with the British up to Nova Scotia, that they would be arrested. And if they came back a second time, they'd be executed.
This is a tough town.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, seems pretty gentle now. Jim, your book is based on, I believe, the diary of a young, young Scituate man? Was he 24 years old?
He was in his early 20s, Sergeant Israel Litchfield, one of the many, many, many Litchfields in Scituate.
Yes.
And he wrote a unique diary from November of 1774 all the way through 1775. And a lot of it was not about the war, but what's particularly interesting for us is that during this crisis period after Lexington and Concord, we get a day-to-day description from him of what the militia were doing in Scituate and Marshfield, which is very unique. It's one of the very few diaries that we have at that time.
And something I also thought was very unique, the numbers of young men and older men that volunteered to come out for the militia. Scituate, Norwell, because again, Scituate, Norwell was all Scituate. The number is very high. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. They got organized very early, and I just assume that they had a devoted crew of people. They had a militia for a long time, and they were actually on the training field when they got news from a post writer about the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So they were just abandoning their training for the day and coming back home, so that our event takes place on the next day, the day after Lexington and Concord.
Old Scituate Reacts Patriots Day, 1775. Again, this is going to be presented twice on the Patriots Day holiday, April 21st, once in each of the First Parish churches in Norwell and Scituate. So time and place, Wendy, for people that aren't that familiar with where those are.
So First Parish of Norwell is on River Street in Norwell, and that'll be taking place at 11 o'clock. And then we're going to do the same play again at First Parish of Scituate, which is on First Parish Road in Scituate at 1:30.
I like the way that we talked a little bit also about nuances, and it's not just going to be only about men and stories about men. It's about other people who were also around at the time who may not have gotten a voice then, but they have a voice now.
Yeah, I feel it's really important to give all those points of view. I think we assume that everybody in 1775 was a patriot. They were all on board, but it was a difficult decision to make. You were basically committing treason, and there were a lot of people that felt it was just easier to kind of go with the flow. And we try to represent all those voices in the play. We do have Tories, which are loyalists, and then we also have a number of patriots, obviously, but then the other voice voices we're expressing. So it is a mock, we're a fictional town meeting. And obviously in 1775, women would not have been able to speak up at a town meeting, but we have two women who express their own viewpoints. I think it's great that you're a patriot, husband, but you're going to leave me at home with my 8 children under the age of 6 and my farm, and as you go off and fight. We also have a black man who speaks up. Again, wouldn't have happened at an actual town meeting in 1775, but he questions the definition of freedom. And I think it's important that we talk about, Tory versus Patriot, women and men, and the opinions of whites and blacks.
It's interesting, too, and again, there's a great article in the Patriot Ledger by Sue Scheibel about, in the play summary, the colonists, you write, were asking for the restoration of their rights as citizens of the British Empire and not necessarily seeking independence from Britain. I think people would be surprised to hear that because, as you said, the story that we hear when we're in school or high school or college, it's we did this, we did that, and then we won.
Exactly.
And it's not quite that smooth, a linear narrative.
It isn't, but I do think that when you get into the details of history, it does make it a lot more interesting than that black and white that we were often taught, probably mostly because of time constraints. But, Jim was just saying, off air that we weren't ready yet to be independent. We just were looking for restoration of rights, but then came Lexington and Concord and the Siege of Boston and then Bunker Hill. And at that point, there was no going back.
Jim, what do you think will surprise people about this play?
I think it'll be surprised that there is a black character. And people don't realize there were about 100 African Americans in Old Scituate, just right before the war. That's a number that a lot of people just have never heard of. So it's not a small part of the population. These are towns with 2,000 people in them approximately at the time. So it was an important part of the population. So it's great to have Asher speak up. I also just wanted to give a plug for the churches because...
Sure.
And this is a great location for these plays because the actual situation was that the churches served as both a town meeting location and a church. And the ministers in Massachusetts at that time were overwhelmingly pro-patriot. They were, in many cases, more radical than the average citizen was. And some of their sermons were pretty
fiery.
Upfront, and fiery. So.
Now, what surprises me, too, tell us about this, the director of the play. It's neither one of you.
No, Nope. It isn't. Neither Jim nor I felt qualified to be a director. I barely felt qualified to be a playwright. But we got the name of Oliver Massey from our sponsor, Achiever Tavern, and Oliver has directed many plays, and many of the actors in the play have a connection with Oliver, which is just great. So he's 15 years old, and he is a student at Thayer Academy right now, and he is someone that we'll all be able to say we knew him when.
Absolutely. And for people that are listening, again, time and place for these plays and how people can find out more information.
So to find out more information, you can visit both the Norwell and the Scituate Historical Society's websites. So norwellhistoricalsociety.org and scituatehistoricalsociety.org. And the time for the Norwell play at First Parish of Norwell is at 11 o'clock. And the time for the Scituate play is 1:30 at First Parish of Scituate.
That sounds fantastic.
And
Jim, anything you want to add?
should mention that it's first come, first serve. There are no tickets. It's free, but there's limited seating capacity in the churches. So get there early, especially if it's a nice day.
Absolutely. And, you were kind enough to give me a list of, I believe, most of the people that did volunteer. And you see a lot of the same names you see today, Bowker, Briggs, Cushing, Merritt, a lot of the same names. And, you've got some old biblical names, and I would be remiss because I know that I looked through here. There was a Pickles Cushing, and I love that name more than you can imagine. It's talk about making history real. When I saw that, I thought, I want to find out more about this person because it's not everybody was just a patriot or our British soldier. It seemed like there's a lot of good stories, and you've managed to capture some of these. And I know you're going to have a great turnout. We're going to get this interview up online too, so people can go back and listen to it. Anything else you folks want to add?
I want to add that people are going to have a chance to kind of interact with the actors, because people who come early enough are going to get a character card, which is a very simple description of a real person living at the time, women as well as men. So what the hope is that they can read the brief description of the person and get into that role themselves and cheer at the appropriate time if they're a Tory for the Tory, or boo him if they're a patriot.
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
That's all I know.
Huzzah!
Okay, that's all we know.
Probably mispronouncing
Right.
it. This is terrific. I know we're going to try to get one of our people over there, because I think this would be a great play to see. Again, that's going to be on Patriots Day in the two parishes, in Norwell and in Scituate. We've been speaking with Jim Glinski, historian, author, member of the Scituate Historical Society. Just a few of your accolades, Wendy, too, because you are very busy. You're the president of the Norwell Historical Society, and I know you're involved in a lot of things. What a great idea to have this Old Scituate Reacts Patriots Day 1775, an interactive play recreating a 1775 town meeting. Admission is free, seating is limited. Make sure you make it a point to get there. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
for having us.
Christine.
You're welcome. I'm Christine James, 95.9 WATD, 59 WATD.